Hey random strangers, how you going? We have had a massive break from HBK, but we're here, ready to forge ahead with season 2, and we have a bunch of comments to get through this time as well. I was actually looking back at the comments after a long time and had forgotten that a couple of you had actually called me out for my feelings about Hashimoto and Shuuichi again. So we will get to them eventually, even though they're not the main focus of the last 2 episodes. But quickly, I don't hate them. I actually think Hashimoto is an excellent music instructor, if a bit creepy. And Shuuichi, I think Shuuichi is just a victim of bland writing. So even though I still think I have good reasons for thinking what I do, I actually really appreciate being called out, because the whole point of a channel like this is to hear and to consider different perspectives. And you guys always come up with spades in terms of that. So thank you so much. Now, with season 2, I remember before starting season 2 of HBK that the biggest question in my mind was, what other sources of drama or conflict can the writers introduce to keep the story fresh and to keep us interested? Yes, there is that overarching underdog to top dog plotline in terms of KyoAni's progression towards the Nationals, but I think what really punches in HBK are the personal and like the interpersonal struggles that individual band members have to overcome. Season 1 dealt with Kumiko and her lethargy, or her indifference, which really turned out to be a defense mechanism that was triggered by a traumatic experience with a former senpai that caused her to kill off any expectations or musical ambition so as not to go through that pain again. Now, through meeting Reina and being infected almost by her unwavering commitment to being special, Kumiko is now in a heaps better mind space where she unapologetically lives out her passion for playing the youth to the best of her ability. And that was a hugely satisfying arc that tracks with what I know to be many musicians' own journeys towards figuring out whether they have that gumption to persist in music. There was also that related drama with Reina and the challenge that she posed not just to KyoAni's solo debut, but the mindset of most of the entire band at the time, who were stuck in the old habits of automatically giving solo parts to seniors and were actually lethargic in terms of not even believing that they could be anything other than just a mediocre band. So even though we only focused on a few select band members, every single person had to make an important choice. Were they in or were they out? Like, did they want to make something of themselves or just continue for all time to be like squishy and apathetic? And the fact that they collectively chose to get up off their musical butts was another really satisfying development. So it was like, okay, so where do they go from here? And the answer seems to be that in season 2, the band is going to have to face last year's demons from the big split and all of the scars that left on the remaining band members. So it is a conflict that they have planted since the very beginning of season 1, which is I thought was really cool. And we were kind of given very tantalizing glimpses into it and sort of the vague contours of what the conflict had been about, but no specific details up until this point as to how the personalities clashed and what exactly happened to cause the big blow up. And it looks like we're actually going to be getting into that in season 2. Because with the reappearance of NOZOMI, the very charismatic flutist who instigated the mass walkout of the rest of, well, half of her fellow first years, I think the T is going to be in whether the band can withstand revisiting past tensions while continuing to deal with the rising pressure of having to compete and perform in even tougher competitions. And we seem to be focusing in particular on the Minami girls. So Asuka, NOZOMI, Mizore, and Natsuki as well, who seem to be at the heart of all this tension. So interesting to see how their choices will impact everyone else. Also, is Kumiko, oh man, Kumiko, is she going to stuff everything up by poking her nose into things that aren't really her business? Okay, here we go with the recap. So, episode 1 opened with the very happy aftermath of winning the first round of the Kyoto competition. And there were a lot of cute moments, but one that stuck out to me was when Haruka asked Kaori to hold the winner's certificate for the group photo because she just happened to be standing next to Haruka. But Kaori was like, oh, no. And something in that tiny interaction made me wonder whether Kaori is still quite conscious about not appearing entitled to any special treatment. The whole solo drama with Reina has been dealt with, but Kaori still seems sensitive about not poking that bear again, even though I don't think anyone, not even Reina, would think anything of her holding the certificate on behalf of the group. And it was a really fleeting moment. Maybe it didn't mean anything, but I thought the way that I read it was a subtle, well-placed reminder that the emotional equilibrium that this band has found is still relatively new and quite fragile. And I think that'll actually play into the drama that is about to unfold with Nozomi and digging up the past. In that celebratory photo, how real was it that you just see so many different emotions captured there? There were at least a couple of people who weren't ready for the shot, some who are just bawling tears, and others, especially Hazuki, who are celebrating openly and fully their bodies. And then there's some like Kumiko and Reina who have a lot more restraint, partly because they still can't believe that they've won. So everyone responds to success differently, but however they feel right now, they all face this new reality that Taki laid out for them in his kind of slightly awkward post-victory address. And he mentioned that now they have a name and a reputation to live up to. From now on, people will expect their future performances to be of the same, if not of a higher quality. Now, for all the competitive musicians out there, I wonder what's worse, having not much of a reputation or even a bad one so that no one expects anything of you, or establishing yourself as a quality performer so that now people do have expectations of you and there's that pressure to keep performing well as like a fear of future failure or regression. It's like the higher you go, the greater the fall if you do fall. And that shift in expectation requires like an accompanying shift in mindset, learning to manage that pressure of going from zero to a certain standard, which is what most of season 1 was about, is very different to how you'd approach keeping and then exceeding that higher standard. And just from personal experience, improvements, especially in musical performance, when you've hit a more advanced level, it kind of happens in stops and starts. So in the beginner stages, progress feels like it happens a lot faster and continuously. And then once you hit a certain level, it feels like you flatline for a bit, and it takes much more effort to get only a little bit better. It's just odd how the law of diminishing returns also applies to music performance too. So I guess going forward with Gataoji, that's sort of the reality that they have to face, this flatlining or this law of diminishing returns in terms of how well they perform as a band. Kumiko also realized that getting to the Kansai competition made making it to nationals a very real possibility. It's not a pipe dream anymore, which is kind of scary. But for Kumiko to be the one to say that was significant, or to think that rather, because she was thinking it in her head. Because for a long time she had this attitude of, well, you can't be disappointed if you don't expect much. But since rediscovering her passion for music and dealing with the emotional baggage and the guilt of just being better at others in music, she has put that past version of herself behind. She wants to do great things now, and it's still scary to now be thinking that nationals is within reach, but she is not so scared that she would pass up that chance to succeed, which is awesome character development. And then later, Kumiko also asked a really interesting or really important question for anyone who is in a competitive sort of field to ask. And that was, will getting to nationals make them special? Will that be when they can say that they've reached their musical peak? And will it satisfy their own ambitions? And I think that's when it really comes down to the individual. Like, say they got to nationals but didn't win it. I think most people in the band would be devastated, naturally. And yet, I could see how some people in the band would then take the view of, well, look how far we came. And like, we did our best and achieved something greater than we have ever done before. And for those people, even just reaching nationals would be something special. You know, because not everyone gets to nationals. But for someone like Reina, the answer is not clear at all. For her, there will always be a further goal to reach beyond the horizon, like a higher peak to climb. And maybe there will never, ever be that moment where she can just stand still and say, yes, I'm special now. Even if they won nationals, I think there would be a moment of euphoria. But then I think she'd be back to, okay, well, what's next now? Have I done enough to truly be special? Do we have to win it again next year or several years in a row? Like, how long do we have to be special for? Or is there something even beyond nationals that I need to go and achieve? The only thing that is for certain is that if they don't win nationals, they won't be special ever. And for someone as ambitious as Reina, winning nationals is a necessary but an insufficient condition for being special. I feel like she is the kind to constantly just be treading water to be special and stay special. Now, it is important to stop and think, is that healthy mentally? And I think there are certain rare people for whom always striving to stand out is just what they were built to do. And you cross those kinds of people all the time in music circles. But for a lot of other people, that kind of constant pressure can be really crushing. A conversation I'd have with my students when I was teaching music was, what do you want? Not what do your parents want or what are your friends doing, but what are you aiming to get out of practicing music? How far do you want to go? Essentially, what is your own definition of special? Because, look, to be honest, not everyone is like Reina. And if you're pushing hard to satisfy someone else's definition of special, that's when it gets really ugly. So I just remember as a teacher, especially, you always had to make sure that your student was just doing it for themselves and actually enjoying the process. And I think for anyone really who feels that drive to achieve something special, that in itself is a positive thing, but also to just constantly be checking yourself whether you're doing it for the right reasons. It was interesting to hear Taki directly relate the potential of the whole band to the individual students that stand out in terms of musical ability. And he specifically pointed out Kaori, Asuka, Reina, of course, and Mizore. And that is accurate in the context of a music ensemble. If you have people in your section that play brilliantly, often everyone else in that section feels the pressure in a good kind of way to match them as closely as possible. An example I can think of is that in high school, we had 3 levels of string orchestras split according to player ability. So open strings was the best, then there was second strings, and then third strings. And it was partly for practical reasons so that the school could cater for a wide range of musical abilities and have people at roughly the same levels playing together. But it was also motivational in a way. You wanted to make it to open strings or the top orchestra because the people there were the best. And I remember that even in the top orchestra, within the individual instrument sections, there was always 1 or 2 people who were head and shoulders above everyone else, like the Reina of the section. I remember like in our violin section in open strings, there were 2 girls who by early high school had already hit Elmas level. So just to give you an idea of how insane that is, music exams here go from like grade 1 all the way to grade 8. And grade 8 is like minimum music teacher level. And then after grade 8, you have A+A, which is a lot harder than grade 8 to pass. And then after A+A is L+A, which is insanely more difficult than A+A, and the pass rate is about 10%. So I have to say, having those Elmas girls in the orchestra, along with some other people who were very close to their level, did raise the standard of the orchestra. Knowing that we had people who could do harder pieces somehow allowed the rest of us to follow. Having talked about insanely talented people, I loved the balance that Hibike presents by showing us Team Monika's performance too. Sure, it wasn't played by the most talented people, but the piece itself was really fun and really energetic, and the band enjoyed it too, especially Kumiko. It made her reminisce about all of the disappointments and hardships that Hazuki and Natsuki both went through, and yet here they are now playing their hearts out, just enjoying the experience of playing music together. And for someone as jaded as Kumiko, and yes, she is a high schooler, but after 7 years of continuous practice on any instrument, it's hard not to be jaded. It is so important to be reminded of the real reason why you started playing music in the first place. Years and years can pass, and sometimes you just forget why you're doing it, or whether it's worth the bleeding fingers and the nosebleeds and the stress, and sometimes, well, a lot of times, the lack of a social life. So, even though Team Monika's performance was not high stakes at all, it played an equally important role of reminding everyone that learning music isn't just about winning and getting external praise. It is also, I would say this is the more important thing. It is also about how much you enjoy playing your instrument and playing with others. Like that buzz that you get from creating something that you can't fully express in words. And it's corny, I know, but it's true. And sometimes it's just that simple. So I do not blame Haruka at all for bursting into tears. Like, to be reminded of that by friends who couldn't participate in the competition and yet still feel that joy of music, I think would make anyone emotional. There was another very small, but I still think noteworthy moment when Mizore said that she thinks the first years of all sections should stick together, which Hazuki also agreed with and said is something that Team Monika has been discussing. And I don't think it's a coincidence that people in the band are talking about sticking together. They are learning from history, not only from the pain of the split and the setback that it caused to the whole band, but also the more recent history with Kaori and Reina and all of that drama. So it is impressive, this attempt to, I guess, guard against tribalism or sectionalism, but I couldn't help think that as a narrative ploy, having the characters explicitly resolve to stick with each other may foreshadow something is coming later that will test their newfound unity. And it's probably, well, most definitely the NOZOMI issue. And I was just wondering what exactly. Maybe some people will side with Asuka and be uncomfortable or unwilling to let NOZOMI back into the band because they're worried about her intentions, or maybe even hold a bit of a grudge against her for what she did. And then others like Natsuki who won't understand why people still have a problem with her and just really want the past to be the past. A real strength of Hibike is how most characters don't stay static. Take Reina, who has changed in the sense that she is still the kind of person who won't bother pursuing a relationship with people that she's not interested in, but has expanded the circle of people that she finds worth knowing. And what catalyzed that change, according to Kumiko, and I actually agree with her, was realizing that she just can't steamroll her way over other people's feelings in the pursuit of becoming special. Or she can, but that path comes with all of the unpleasantness of being called out, rightly or wrongly, for being an inconsiderate asshole. Past Reina wouldn't have cared so much about that, but the equation has changed now. She has established these relationships with other bandmates, including with Yuuko and Kaori, and she's learned that she does respect and care about the feelings of others, and that she can do so without compromising her own ambitions. They're not mutually exclusive. So, you know what? All praise to Reina, like great character growth there as well. And I hope that she continues to mature in her way of thinking. We all know Kumiko has changed too, and nothing illustrated that better than seeing her wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning to practice with Reina. And since we're talking about how both Kumiko and Reina have changed, let's also talk about how their relationship has evolved as well. So skipping to the fireworks festival, Reina asked Kumiko out on a date to the festival in a kind of a very Reina way, very direct, blunt, out of the blue. And Kumiko just Kumiko'd instinctively. She was like, what? Huh? And I just find it so funny that she still gets thrown by how Reina doesn't beat around the bush, unlike herself. And the teasing that ensued was all very cute. And watching Kumiko make Reina suffer is always entertaining. We saw the same dynamic again when Kumiko asked Reina out if she wanted to go to the pool. And Reina surprised Kumiko again by being so willingly, social. The key thing here is that their relationship continues to become an increasingly comfortable one. Reina asking Kumiko to the festival was like a great recall to and a contrast to their date in season 1, when the reason that they went out to the festival together was because Kumiko panicked and was looking for an excuse to get out of a date with Shuuichi. Instead of accidentally falling into spending time together, they are actively seeking out each other's company and relying on each other for support now. Now, you guys know I always do my best to try and curb my enthusiasm for Kumirei, but can we please just call out Kumiko's appreciative look up and down Reina? How can these two be so cute together? I feel like also this is one of those situations where Kumiko and her lack of a brain to mouth filter really came in handy. She can't help but compliment and gush over Reina, which is, I think, a bedrock of any healthy relationship. I also loved that Reina doesn't really know how to respond to such open praise, except to just be like, okay, shut up, let's go now. You would think that Reina, someone who knows how good she is and doesn't shy away from telling people that, wouldn't be embarrassed when it comes to these open displays of affection. But interestingly, the sorts of compliments that aren't related to her musical prowess, but are more about her actual person and her appearance, do make her flustered. And Kumiko enjoys Reina's flusteredness. Oh, that's Shuuichi. Okay, we'll get to Shuuichi in a bit. I just thought how cute it was that Kumiko is so soft over Reina, and they just work together so well. Now, this is the weird bit. There was that encounter with Shuuichi and his friend where Shuuichi got defensive over his yakisoba, which is fair enough. And meanwhile, Kumiko was thinking back to the awkwardness of turning him down for the previous Agata festival. Then, as if kind of reading Kumiko's mind, Reina came up out of nowhere and with this smug look on her face, joked with Shuuichi and said, I wouldn't mind coming with you to get your yakisoba. First off, the dialogue that Reina said didn't actually match up to Shuichi's line about yakisoba, and it matched instead with what Kumiko was thinking in her head. So I don't know why the editing was like that. How could Reina have perfectly read Kumiko's mind at that exact moment? It was just weird. Regardless, I think Reina was just making a very clear power move to throw Shuuichi off, to kind of rub it in his face that Kumiko needs a strong, decisive, fearless person. Someone kind of like herself. All right, here is where I'm going to bring in this fantastic write-up by Oliver Yayato that addressed the writing around Kumirei in contrast to Shuuichi. Now, I know it's all fun and games, I cringe whenever Shuuichi comes on, and you guys go, I can't believe you hate him, and then I'm like, but no, I just think he's a really boring character. That's all sort of surface level stuff. I think what is actually happening, if we were to dig deeper into why it just feels like, to me, Shuuichi is a wasted, if not a superfluous character in Hibike, has a lot to do with what kind of anime this is. So, Oliver Yayato wrote, first we have to keep in mind that Shuuichi, apart from Taki, is the most prominent male character in the show. So naturally, part of his purpose is to be a relatable figure for the male audience. Obviously, it's not as extreme as with the generic and empty self-insert main characters in many isekai or harem anime, but I still think it might play a part in him not getting too much characterization. Thank you for writing that, because I feel like that sums up why I just get so when Shuuichi does have parts. it's like, I just feel bad for the guy. I think he could have been an amazing character. I wish that he had more scenes with Kumiko and with other band members too, like Reina or even Asuka or whoever, that shows more of his character and shows that he can be such a good friend. Also, maybe talk more about like his journey in playing the trombone. I just feel like he got gypped in that sense. Wait, did I read the most important part? Oh, yes. I think I skipped the part where it says, I think the big difference between Kumirei shippers and Shuuichi fans or apologists has to do with the amount of anime experience. And then sleeping down further, when you've watched lots of shows, you also know that anime are a lot more constricted by target demographics and genre expectations. Unless shows are explicitly marked as yuri or boys love, the viewer will know from the start that there very likely be no genuine same-sex romance, especially not involving main characters. That's the reason most people have accepted from the beginning that the relationship of Kumiko and Reina is written as your extremely close friendship between high school girls. Which is fair. I think, even though I've not watched that many animes, I have slowly begun to just accept or at least be aware of the fact that if it's not a yuri anime, it's not going to have any same-sex romance, or even if there's sort of like chemistry that you see sparking off the screen, it's not going to turn into anything, which is, I guess, fine. That's just is what it is. And finally, if you were to ignore genders and just thought of Reina and Shuuichi both as two possible romance options on equal footing, I'm sure most people would agree that Kumirei have much better chemistry right now and would be dumbfounded why Kumiko and Shuuichi should end up together instead. That's why you really should watch a real yuri anime bloom into you at some point. Reveal, once I'm done with this batch of animes, I am definitely going to start Bloom Into You. That is actually the next series that is on the list. So thank you, Oliver Yayato, for writing all of that out in a clear way. It's not that there are some things that Shuichi did where I was like, in real life, it'd probably be like, maybe you shouldn't have done that. But generally, I loved when Shuichi and Kumiko had those moments where they were really supporting each other. I feel bad that he got shoehorned into kind of like a potential romantic interest for Kumiko, but not being given any dialogue or any sort of character moments that would suggest that he is anything other than just your generic male character. So I really feel bad for him. Beyond the teeny romance stuff, I think at the core, just going back to the awkward yakisoba incident, at the core of Reina's disdain is how she can't relate to people who don't express strong preferences or are easily swayed by others. That includes Kumiko. So people who don't really act decisively to get what they want. Even though Kumiko has come a long way, there is still a part of her that finds it easier to sit on the fence or let others decide for her, because that way, theoretically, you don't get disappointed and you don't disappoint others. It is the total opposite of how Reina deals with people and with life in general. And neither is better or worse, it's just different. So obviously, it's not Reina's place to change that about Kumiko, but it is a very, very stark point of difference between them. Even in their last exchange at the festival, when Reina suggested kind of very matter-of-factly, let's go again next year, Kumiko's first response was, really? As in, are you sure? Because in her mind, nothing is certain and you should just kind of go with the flow, not expect too much in case things don't turn out the way that you think they will or that you want them to. Because of course she wants to go with Reina again next year, but not decisively saying, yes, let's go, is a symptom of that fear of hers to not explicitly commit so that she can't be disappointed no matter what happens. Whereas Reina is more, if you want something, decide to make it happen and it will happen. Like, why would you not be sure or sit on the fence about it? She is someone with much less doubt in her mind about things. And I think that is in some way a luxury to have. It's if you don't have to deal with all of these second guessings and doubting that others want to do what you want to do, even though you want them to want that. It's such a load off your brain in some ways. So lucky for Reina that she's like that. But also I love that that's what makes the Kumirei relationship so interesting, because of that significant point of difference. I'd forgotten for a hot second how gay the end of episode 1 was until I watched it again. It was, yes, a big Kumirei moment, but also Kumiko reflected on how this moment in time and this period of her life won't last forever. Just like the beautiful fireworks that they were enjoying, and all that will remain is the smoke, or like the hazy memories of a time past. The friendships that they now have, the band, this whole exciting enterprise of working together to get to nationals. One day, like it did for Aoi and for Mamiko, they'll have to move on with their lives, and a lot of them will naturally have to prioritize things in life other than music. And it was such a KyoAni lesson, exhorting us to savor the good times and the friendships while you can. And they always do that through showing cherry blossom trees or fireworks, things whose beauty is brilliant but very fleeting. And from Kumiko, it was also the very visceral imagery of Reina's hair blowing mesmerizingly in the wind, and the very tight grip of Reina's hand. Things that she has right now, right in this moment, that she loves. But it is one thing to know that you should cherish what you have in the present. It is an entirely different thing dealing with the fear of one day actually facing the loss of those close relationships. I empathize with Kumiko a lot. From time to time, I will do this thing where I will project myself into the future and imagine what it would be like to have lost people that are close to me right now. So family members or friends. And I've always been the kind of person to think a lot about death and the brevity of human life. Now, it's not as weird as it sounds. I hope maybe some of you are like similar. But the idea is really to pull yourself out of your own present and busyness for a bit, and take stock of what and who really matters to you, and then redouble your efforts to create as many good memories as you can with them, so that you don't end up with regrets at the end of your life or at the end of the road. And I thought that Kumiko, thinking about this as she was watching the fireworks, just thinking about how one day all this is going to end, was quite mature of her. And really, it is something that everyone should be thinking about at some point in their lives, hopefully earlier in your life, so that you have more time to create good memories and to savor the goodness that you have right now. One more thing before getting to the Nozomi of it all. I want to focus a bit on Kumiko's relationship and interactions with her family, which I found fascinating. And so I wonder how much Kumiko's family, specifically her parents, are aware of the extent to which she has changed. And I wondered that because Kumiko's response to her mum congratulating her for winning gold and advancing to the Kansai competition with a band was a very, very tepid, there was none of the exuberance and the shock of winning that we saw previously, nor any of the tear-filled desperation that we've seen from her wanting to become the best, like Reina. So when Kumiko's at home, she still looks and acts like the apathetic, disengaged person that she was before at the beginning of season 1. So the following exchange Kumiko had with her mum, I think, represented that all too common scenario where parents are pretty much out of touch with the internal lives of their kids. It's not very unusual. The disconnect was especially obvious when her mom just assumed that Mamiko would be happy for Kumiko too, because, quote, she used to be in band too. And we did see later that Mamiko is happy for Kumiko, but her feelings are a lot more complicated than what her mom appears to understand them to be. Now, I'm sure Kumiko has great parents, but let's just break down the levels of parental obliviousness that was shown there. To start with, it doesn't seem like Kumiko's mom is aware of how Mamiko is still a little bit bitter about having to have given up music to study. Like, sure, she has accepted it and even counseled Kumiko to take a reality pill and prepare for her dreams one day to come crashing down to the ground in due time. But her body language, Mamiko's body language and response every time Kumiko's band activities came up clearly showed that she still hasn't quite made complete peace with how music isn't a big part of her life anymore. Which brings us to the second layer of parental obliviousness. The fact that Mom just simplistically thought that Mamiko would be happy that Kumiko's band won. Now, she's not wrong exactly, because Mamiko would be happy on some level because she's not an awful person who would rain on her sister's parade. But along with that happiness would also be mixed feelings of sadness or envy or regret, or just remembering all the good times that she no longer has. So can we blame Kumiko's mom for being a little bit oblivious? No, not really. I think kids, probably more so in high school than at any other time in their lives, put on masks in front of their parents, either because they think they wouldn't understand or they just don't want to, I guess, disappoint them. Let's talk about the moment that Mamiko asked Kumiko outright about getting to the Kansai competition, and Kumiko again did her signature indifferent. Yeah. She didn't even look at Mamiko, and here's what I thought was going on. I suspect that she was trying to downplay her excitement about the competition, and I wondered if because Kumiko knows that Mamiko still struggles with not being in band anymore, and therefore she didn't want to hurt her sister's feelings by making a big deal about the success that she had just rightfully earned. She didn't want to stoke any sort of potential jealousy, and it felt like such a learned response from having dealt with the senpai who did go nuts after Kumiko took her competition spot. So it's very different circumstances, but with an underlying similarity in the sense of Kumiko finding herself in a position that the other person wants to be in. But she probably could have given Mamiko more credit. Mamiko clearly does care and is happy for Kumiko, and is not the kind of person, as we said, to project her disappointment or her bitterness unfairly onto a younger sister. And it was interesting to see this example of how a terrible experience in Kumiko's life in the past still impacts how conscious she is of other people's reactions to her talent and her success, even though she really shouldn't have to be so careful. Nozomi, here we go. Actually, no, wait, before we start, I wanted to read this comment from Joshua Lee, or Digital Pheasant, who wrote, Nozomi's character inspired me to pick up the flute again after not playing since childhood. That is so awesome. I was actually really happy to read that. Myself, even as a non-brass player, seeing these kids discover the joy and the drive that you can develop from wanting to play an instrument also has like a definite inspirational factor to it. For me, especially, I really enjoyed when we focused on Team Monica and how I was Kumiko, basically, watching Team Monica, learning and being reminded that ultimately the most valuable thing about playing an instrument is the happiness that it adds to your life. That is such a wholesome and the most true thing about playing music. So yeah, it was awesome to see that comment pop up. All right, Nozomi, where do we even begin with Nozomi? So the fact that Nozomi had a very palpable presence right from the start of season 2 confirms her importance to the season's arc, obviously. And some of you in the comments actually did confirm, because I was wondering this myself, that both Nozomi and Mizore have appeared in the background for some scenes in season 1, which was very cool. Of course, KyoAni and their obsession for detail would have sprinkled in hints of their presence everywhere. So personality-wise, Nozomi is confident, she's open and outgoing, and it seems like she would easily get along with anyone in normal circumstances. On top of that, she is 100% passionate about her music and about playing the flute. So when Kumiko found Nozomi out on the top floor and commented that she must really, really like the flute, that split-second pause before Nozomi turned around and said, "Yep, I love it," was so telling and actually super relatable. Because funnily enough, so after watching this, I was just thinking, it's not often that people will ask you, as someone who plays an instrument, will ask you whether you really like the instrument that you're playing, even if they know that you've been playing it for a very, very long time. Like, I started playing piano when I was 3 or 4 years old, and then violin when I was 7. And in all the years that I've played, I can remember maybe once where I was asked if I really actually liked playing those instruments. So I understood why Nozomi was a bit caught off guard, like, what? Oh yeah, I do love flute. It's a question that forces you to check the reason for why you keep playing. Like, am I playing for the right reasons? Does playing music still bring me joy? And I think in that split second, Nozomi was also running through all of the suffering that comes with serious practice. All of the drama from band and the drama that is still ongoing, all of the relationships that were broken, and yet concluding that despite all of that, the flute is still something that she loves to play, which is amazing. Elsewhere, Kumiko asked Reina a similar question. She was like, have you always lived for the trumpet? What does it even mean to live for an instrument? And to me, it means that you love it so much, you'll do anything to keep playing it and to keep improving, despite how immensely difficult it can be sometimes. Whether that difficulty comes from other people giving you a hard time about it, or just the sheer repetitiveness and pain of practice, like both physical pain and mental pain. Interestingly, Reina, unlike Nozomi, did not hesitate at all when she answered. She was just like, yep, trumpet's my life, as if it's like, oh, 1 + 1 = 2. Of course I love trumpet. Different people, I think, will have different or varying degrees of hesitancy when answering that question. And the fact that Reina didn't even have to think about it or wasn't even shocked by it makes her pretty rare in my understanding. Because were I to be asked that same question, and it would also depend on when I got asked it, at times in my past of playing instruments, I would have hesitated saying that I live for my piano or my violin. Honestly, sometimes it was just getting through the dark ages of music exams. Sometimes I'd probably just shrug my shoulders and be like, man, I don't know. I don't know why I'm putting myself through so much pain. So yeah, that question, do you really like your instrument or do you really live for your instrument? Ask your musician friends if you have any. You might cause some midlife crises by asking it. Or you might get a really positive answer, as in the case of Nozomi or of Reina. What else do we know about Nozomi? She is someone whom Natsuki has looked up to since they went to school together, which says a lot. Nozomi is principled, strong-willed, will do what she says she will do, and she isn't swayed by the opinions of others, even when it would be easier to just go along with the crowd, which kind of sounds very familiar to someone we already know. In short, she is natural leadership material, which explains why she was the president of the concert band in her middle school and also became the ringleader for the rebellion as a first-year high schooler at KyoAni. She is someone clearly whom people respect enough to listen to, and importantly, someone who cares enough to try and change bad situations, even situations that are complicated and require lots of effort to change. But it was also those same characteristics that made it more likely that Nozomi would get into conflict with others. Importantly, though, it's not like Nozomi immediately went for the Fight Club option when confronting the third years about their laziness. She did actually beg them first to try. And given her experience as a leader, she probably thought that she could persuade them to see things her way. And only when reason fell on deaf ears did Nozomi go all nuclear and called out the slackers and then quit. Now, here is where you could ask some interesting questions about what was the right way to deal with the third years who were dragging the rest of the band down. And when you look at each of the different responses that we saw in the characters that were presented in these episodes, I think it would have been hard to determine a right way. So you had Natsuki, who kind of threw her arms in the air and just couldn't be asked to dealing with stubborn losers who, unfortunately, as third years, had all the power. in what was an unfair, unmeritocratic system with an equally bad teacher who obviously didn't care enough. Why bother trying to change things when you have zero control over the situation, is Natsuki's response, which is totally understandable. And then we saw Asuka's more practical take. Now, in these episodes, in the present, Nozomi and Natsuki were begging Asuka to let Nozomi back into the band. And at the start, Asuka sort of joked about only being a middle manager and not having the power to make anything happen. But that didn't stop Nozomi from persisting with getting Asuka's approval. So for a while, I was like, why? Why does she have to go through Asuka? Like, if Nozomi really wanted to rejoin, she would ask, I would think, either Taki or Michi-sensei or even Haruka, and it probably wouldn't have been a problem. But she was, for some reason, dead set on having Asuka give the go-ahead, which tells us that the real problem is that a relationship or trust was broken, and Nozomi really wants to earn that trust back. Not force her way into the band or be reluctantly let back in, but be accepted wholeheartedly with whatever happened in the past well and truly put behind them. We also all know that Asuka, and not Haruka, is the one who wields real power and influence in the band, even though Haruka has massively improved and upped her commanding presence. But in this particular case, the reason why Asuka is special to Nozomi, and there's that word again, special, is because during Nozomi's campaign against the Third Years and her very credible threat to quit the band along with the other kids, Asuka had the foresight to, one, tell Nozomi that it was dumb, which may or may not have been necessary, but that is just Asuka's blunt manner for you. And two, urged Nozomi to just wait out the storm until the following year, when the people in the band would be far more geared towards doing their best and competing seriously. Now, note that Asuka did not disagree that the Third Years were assholes or that Nozomi was wrong to be frustrated, but she had proposed a more rational, longer-term way of managing the conflict, and probably also had foreseen that if Nozomi and also a bunch of first years quit, the band would be in a much worse position and be less likely able to bounce back the next year, which is essentially what happened. So, from a rational perspective, Asuka was right. It was a smart proposal, but Nozomi couldn't wait that long. She was too at the end of her rope to even think about tolerating the losers for the rest of the year, which in my opinion is also an understandable position to take. When you are so passionate about music, but have to accept that you're going to have to waste an entire year you could have spent towards working and getting to nationals, just like she'd promised Mizore, it would be absolutely infuriating to keep your anger under control and in check and just kind of, just wait it out. Like the pain you would have to tolerate to the point where it probably just wouldn't be worth the tax on your mental well-being. Especially also, these are high schoolers, so drama is heightened 100 times when you're that age. Think about any toxic workplace or classroom situation. You've got to face these people regularly and not say anything when they engage in toxic or frustrating behavior in order to keep the peace. So to ignore them, yes, was an option, but I can also totally get why Nozomi just couldn't and had to leave. I don't blame her at all. Not everyone has Asuka's ability to choose not to care. Since that time, Nozomi has clearly thought through what Asuka said and figured out that she was right. And if you think about it, also waiting another year was a bigger risk for Asuka compared to Nozomi, who, when the losers were around, Asuka was already in her second year, so would have only had one last year to make it to nationals. And I don't doubt that Asuka cares about getting to nationals as much as anyone else. Nozomi wanting to help was admirable. It's not like she suddenly wants in now that the band has won a competition, because she didn't even seem aware of or believe just how badly the band wants to get to nationals now. But even if there had been a smidge of selfishness in this latest push to rejoin the band, I think that would also have been understandable too, because the truth of the matter is Nozomi misses playing in band. It's just sad to not be part of something that you love. And it reminded me of when Mamiko asked why Kumiko wanted to keep going with band, and Kumiko just said, I like it. You know, Kumiko and Nozomi share that same pure enjoyment of music and of playing together with other people. It always comes back to that common thread. Maybe if Nozomi had a Reina by her side, things might have gone differently. I could totally imagine Reina would have raged at the third years and challenged them all to a showdown. Or maybe she just would have quit along with Nozomi. Maybe it still would have been an impossible task with a very lackluster teacher who didn't support merit-based internal competition. And speaking of Reina, she had a pretty tough take on Nozomi quitting. Basically, she said Nozomi ran away. You know, she made a choice and now she's living with the consequences. She had to have known that it wouldn't be easy being allowed back into the band after what she'd done. Now, I did not doubt Reina's sincerity when she said that she would never have run away in that situation. I do doubt whether she should be so sure of that. On the one hand, I know that she would beat down everyone who would stood in her way of doing well. She showed that when she stood up to challenge Kaori for the trumpet solo. On the other hand, Reina was bloody lucky that Taki is the kind of teacher that they have now. He was the one who coached the band into deciding for themselves whether they wanted to keep being mediocre or actually do well. He also got rid of the previous system of automatically giving all the seniors the solo parts and all of the competition spots. So I think it was potentially unfair or just overconfident for Reina to say that she wouldn't have done the exact same thing in Nozomi's situation. You know, Nozomi was facing a bad band conductor and an outright hostile third year class. So in my calculations, it was a lot tougher for her. And it's always easy to say, oh, I would never have done that if I was in her shoes. But it's not the same when you just never can say that, I feel, in most situations unless you were actually there. When Nozomi said that she felt like an idiot for not waiting it out just one more year, I felt so bad for her. She is clearly experiencing some serious FOMO right now. But also, how could she have known that the next year would have turned out so much better? Like, she didn't know Taki would arrive on the scene or that they would get a bunch of talented first-year students. And I know you could say, like Reina did, that she should have just stuck it out and not quit. But in the midst of real despair, it's hard to hope. And because I was really feeling for Nozomi, I'm not going to lie, like the way that Asuka rejected her request to rejoin the band was super cold. I'm not sure if she needed to do it in that way. And it was such a tense situation that even Goto had to step in. Curiously, some of the others, and I'm actually glad for this, they don't let Asuka be a dictator, even though she may act like one from time to time. So Goto, he stepped in and was like, not in front of the kids. You know, we will all have a say in this matter later. Although, confusingly, in the end, it did seem like Asuka had the final say anyway because Nozomi specifically wanted her approval. Here was an interesting take from Lorraine G. Not gonna lie, if it weren't for the Minami girls, Natsuki, Yuuko, Mizore, and Nozomi, best characters in the show, fight me, I am definitely not gonna fight you on that. These early eps are pretty hard to watch, especially Asuka in her max insufferable mode. I already didn't like her in season 1 and I hated her even more now. Talking about moving on and starting fresh when she herself is actively preventing someone from getting that new start. As for Reina, you may not like her developments, but it shows that she does at least have some immature sides and less of a perfect being as I made her out to be in season 1. Yeah, actually with Reina, I think she already showed some really serious, huge flaws in season 1, especially her steamrolling of other people's feelings and not having a way about dealing with differences in perspectives. But yeah, she is definitely also having a lot of typical high school girl struggles. Now, back to Asuka. It's so interesting, people's different feelings about Asuka. I know that I've always not had a soft spot for her because she is a tough old bird in some ways, but I guess more a bit of an understanding of why Asuka is the way that she is. But I am also going to be complete agreement with the fact that she, like I said before, she didn't really need to be so harsh with Nozomi, and especially in front of everyone too in that way. I tried to reason out why Asuka did it the way that she did, or what reason or what logic is driving her behavior. So let me just pull up some of these recap screenshots again. So basically they had that whole court session, right? And the outcome was, excuse me, the outcome was Asuka very bluntly telling Nozomi that she wouldn't be an asset to the band. She knows Nozomi means well, but it was still a no. But what does that even mean, that Nozomi wouldn't be an asset? And so this is what Kumiko is also pondering on too. And I think Reina had it partly right. Asuka's worried that if she lets Nozomi back in, there is a small chance that Nozomi won't be able to hold back on pushing her own expectations onto other people again, which would disturb the balance that's been reached after all the drama already, which might jeopardize their chances of winning the Kansai competition. But I think even more than that, Asuka's considering how even if Nozomi doesn't act up, the negative emotions or the scars that she is linked to might just set people off again. Maybe Asuka knows something that hasn't been made clear to us yet. For example, that some in the band might still blame Nozomi for the way that she escalated the situation last year. And the extreme case of that is Mizore, who clearly still has some issues with Nozomi, and we'll get to that in a bit. In my mind, though, everyone now in the band are on board with trying for nationals. So I would think that there is a good chance, even if there was still some sort of residual tension, that a truce could be made between Nozomi and the rest of the band, or anyone who does have a problem with her. So I'm gonna sort of wait and see whether Asuka gives any further reasoning for her executive decision to not let Nozomi back in and do it in such a cold way. At the very least, I know that it's not personal and it comes from a place of protecting the band and their chances of winning. But I would have to see whether Asuka's basing her decision on something more solid than just the slight potential possibility that Nozomi will act up or that the other band members won't accept her. Or Asuka could literally just be concerned with Mizore's unresolved conflict with Nozomi, because Mizore is bloody important. Like, she is their only oboe, I think. Maybe that was just last year, but assuming she is still the only oboe that the band has, if she breaks down because she can't handle Nozomi being around again, their chances of doing well at the Kansai competition basically go down the drain. And I wouldn't be surprised if Asuka is also taking that into account. I really loved when Dad Haruka came along and was like, don't worry, kids, just focus on your practice. And being the soft parent that she is, she let slip that most of the first years that quit last year were from Minami Middle School, so a school that Nozomi, Natsuki, Yuuko, and Mizore were from, confirming that Nozomi had a huge influence or a huge role in getting people to quit, or not getting people to quit. Maybe just as a natural leader figure from that group, people just naturally followed her. So the quitters would most definitely have been mostly her old crew. And that gave us one more clue as to why Asuka's worried. Because if Nozomi comes back, does that mean that those who left with her will also want to come back? And wouldn't that make competition for the already limited competitive spots even tighter? And thus cause further dissension or further tension in the band. Do they even deserve to come back after deserting en masse and leaving the band in shambles? So suffice to say, I don't think that Asuka is being petty. Like, there are some real complications with Nozomi rejoining and consequences that aren't entirely predictable, which could potentially jeopardize the band's focus. There are like the feelings of the people currently in the band, including Mizore, plus the intentions of the first years who left, who might look at Nozomi rejoining as a signal for thinking, well, maybe I should rejoin now too. Now, even if Asuka was doing this for ultimately selfish reasons, which is totally not reasonable, like it could be the case too. Like this is her last year to get to nationals after all. It doesn't change the fact that you can't really fault her for refusing Nozomi. You may be able to fault her for the manner in which she did it, but there is enough reason there to give pause to letting Nozomi back in straight away. I mean, the band is doing great as is, notwithstanding how awful it is for Nozomi to be shut out of things. From Asuka's perspective, and actually from my perspective too, when I sort of took into account all of these different moving parts, they don't need to add into the mix a potential like emotional grenade. And as I guess I'm similar to Asuka in that way, like I would just take into account all of the risk factors. And even if the risk is small, given the risk averseness and the stakes that are involved with getting to Kansai or doing well at Kansai, maybe it is the right decision to just shut the door on Nozomi. I feel like I'm going to get flack for empathizing with Asuka again. just to be once and for all clear, I don't think that she should have treated Nozomi in that manner. I think that was a pretty shitty thing of her to have done. But I do also understand the reasoning underlying her decision. Okay. Now, while we're still on Asuka, I just thought that we did get a bit more evidence, aside from all the drama stuff, that she is practically a great section leader, especially when she walked the bass section through staggering their breaths so that a sustained or a long note in the music sounds seamless and uninterrupted. That was another interesting, very practical musical note. We would also do that in the string sections too, like coordinate staggered bowing so that the audience wouldn't hear a break in the sound. I think Asuka is at the very least a fascinating character. I've always enjoyed like the many different sides to her, which makes for interesting. It's like a mine of things to try and understand. She forms her own opinions and sticks to them, but isn't totally unreasonable. Like she just does her own thing even when others don't fully get her. And she has her own sort of wicked sense of humor and doesn't care how people perceive her. She's tough on her section, but she is always helpful. And again, people respect her. Whether you like her or not, you know to like pay attention when Asuka's saying something. Interestingly, she is also able to separate out her feelings and advice as a friend versus her decision-making reasoning as the vice president. That's why I'm so curious to see if we ever get to see how Asuka is like privately with her closer friends, like Haruka and Kaori, maybe even Nozomi, because those two things, being a friend and being a vice president, can often be in conflict with each other, which is another reason people respect her. I think they can trust that she will make the right calls for the good of the band as a whole, with no personal vendetta or personal feelings getting in the way. It is true though, like it's when she immediately snaps from being playful and aloof to dead serious, that is when she becomes truly scary. Like that moment when her demeanor changed after Natsuki asked to speak with her, and Asuka went from joking to like entirely serious because she'd guessed that it was about Nozomi. That kind of gave me a little bit of a chill up my arm. And the music too also helped set up the change in Asuka's tone. So, and I'm talking about the background music that's playing. Immediately after Asuka's playfulness slipped off her face, a dissonant chord plays, followed by another and then another. So dissonant chords are chords that add tension to the music. And those chords punctuated every line of tense dialogue that followed between Natsuki, Asuka, and Nozomi. And so there was definitely some good background scoring going on there. At the end of episode 2, Kumiko was trying to reconcile the seemingly contradictory sides of Asuka. One side not caring about band drama and being really indifferent to the things that other people seem to care so much about, including who gets solo parts, versus her also enjoying band a lot and caring greatly about their progress and wanting everyone to do well and having this protective stance towards letting NOZOMI back in. Essentially, the apparent contradiction is, if Asuka doesn't care, why is she being so stubborn about not letting NOZOMI back in? Wouldn't she just not care about who's in the band or who's out of the band as long as she gets to play? And my take on Asuka's mindset, which I myself would probably have if I was in that band, is there are things that legitimately matter and need to be carefully managed in order for the band to work and do well. And then there are the things that people think matter, but actually don't really. For example, the drama around whether KyoAni or Reina should get the trumpet solo didn't really matter because they're both decent enough players. Sure, Reina is better, and if she got it, maybe they'd have a slight edge in competition, but it wasn't going to be a huge blow if KyoAni took the part. The drama and the rumor spreading and the taking sides that ensued was, in Asuka's view, really pointless. But something like NOZOMI rejoining might have real repercussions, as we kind of discussed earlier. The 30 years may be gone, but there are probably people in the band who still remember the chaos and the damage that the first year's leaving caused, and that NOZOMI was the catalyst for that. And we already talked about how NOZOMI joining might cause other quitters to ask to rejoin, which would complicate the dynamics in the band, including increasing competition for the limited competition spots. So to me, there is no contradiction really in how Asuka acts. She just has a clear and logical way of analyzing whether something is a big deal or not. Now, she may tend to prioritize logic over emotion or relationships, which is what we saw in the way that she dealt with KyoAni and then now NOZOMI, to the point where sometimes you stop for a moment and ask, wait, how heartless? How can she be so heartless? But again, who is to say what's the wrong way of handling these types of fraught, complicated, emotional situations? To me, Asuka is kind of like a general that's overseeing the overall battlefield. You may need to sacrifice like a unit here or there in order to preserve the victory for the entire field. And if you just look at those individual instances, you can be like, man, what a cold-hearted bastard. And that would be true, but also there's a bigger picture that's going on. Now that we've covered NOZOMI and Asuka, let's chat about Mizore, who is a character I found deeply intriguing. And then we'll speculate as to what went wrong in NOZOMI and Mizore's relationship and why they still haven't reconciled with each other. Now, the first thing that we learned about Mizore was that she is just as, or possibly even more dedicated to improving her musicianship as Reina is. And that immediately tells you that she is a unique, potentially quite isolated character. And the second thing that we learned, or more accurately heard, was what she sounds like playing her oboe. Now, Kumiko's characteristically unfiltered assessment that she sounded good but kind of dry sounded like a foreshadowing of what to expect from Mizore's character arc. I interpreted it as she has all of the necessary talent to be an outstanding player, but something inside her is broken emotionally and it's stopping her from playing to her full potential. It's that trope like where if you're not truly enjoying the music that you're playing, you won't sound as good as someone who is equally talented but isn't weighed down by some kind of past trauma or mental block. Although you could also argue it the other way. Like some musicians use their trauma to inject even more feeling and emotion into their music. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting way of putting or expressing Mizore's mindset. I have a confession to make. The oboe is my favorite woodwind instrument, and I remember not really knowing why until I listened to a music podcast where Someone said that the oboe is widely considered to produce the saddest sound out of all of the orchestral instruments. And I was like, that's it. That's why I like it so much. You know, there's something about how the timbre of an oboe can pierce through a thick ensemble of sound that makes it perfect for playing the more expressive, melancholic melodies and songs or solos. And KyoAni, they tend to infuse symbolism into instruments in the sense that their characters often reflect certain stereotypes of the instruments that they play. So I don't think it's a coincidence that Mizore is an oboist. Mizore is like melancholy incarnate. She just exudes sadness in her body language, in the way that she's always alone all the time. Even her voice has a sad tinge to it. And we are starting to learn about the sadness behind her story and her struggle with the very concept of music competitions. As a non-woodwind player, I don't have a dog in the fight, so I'm not here to start any wars, but my understanding from the little research that I did is that the oboe is indeed one of the more difficult woodwind instruments to play for the reasons that the show gave. And this comment from Pencil Sharp 333 provided some very helpful context, so thank you for sending that in. So as for breaking the ice, the name Mizore means sleet or frozen rain, which kind of makes sense. That was interesting to know. It fits with her kind of cold, closed off, distant character. Reeds can be a pain, and double reeds are like pain squared. An oboe reed costs similar to a box of 10 saxophone reeds. They are very fragile, and I've been told that mass-manufactured ones are even more inconsistent than single reeds. The oboe players I know either buy handmade reeds from their teacher or make their own, which is insane. This just seems to require a much higher level of craftsmanship compared to other instruments. So that kind of accorded with my understanding. Like, every instrument is difficult to master, but the oboe is a particularly difficult one. It's a double reeded as opposed to a single reeded instrument, which means that there is a much, much smaller hole through which to expel air. And then that ends up building a lot of pressure behind the reed, which often leads to oboists running out of oxygen before they run out of the air that's still in their lungs, which means they then have to learn how to get rid of that extra air. Otherwise, the carbon dioxide builds up in their lungs, which can be painful. And for particularly long passages, oboists have to use circular breathing. I also actually didn't know about that part about the reeds being particularly finicky, and that a lot of the oboists manually make their reeds. I think they're also like relatively harder to keep in tune, and the fact that the oboe is an older instrument relative to other woodwinds, the fingerings in the music can also be a lot more awkward. So yeah, if anyone is out there that is an oboist and you have any further insights, I would love to know more. But I did really enjoy that short oboe feature in the episode where they panned the camera up and down the instrument. It was almost like they were spotlighting the fact that playing an oboe is freaking hard, and also that there's something about Mizore that makes her particularly suited to the idiosyncrasies of playing an oboe. It's almost as if they're saying, look, the oboe is idiosyncratic, and here is an idiosyncratic character. Kumiko and Reina, they got to the classroom super early, but Mizore was already there. And Reina said, like, Ohayo, and Mizore turned to acknowledge them, but doesn't really respond and just went back to practicing. I particularly loved that moment of recognition that passed between Reina and Mizore. Depending on who had walked in on Mizore, it could have been a super awkward moment. I mean, case in point was Kumiko, who immediately was unsure of how to react to Mizore's silence, but not with Reina, because she gets it. She has been in Mizore's shoes where all you want to do is just focus on your music, and yet the intensity with which you focus risks people not really knowing how to respond to you or looking at you funny or even thinking that you're a bit rude. And okay, it's not like Mizore was completely silenced. She did go, oh, there's two of you today. And then she just went right back to it, which was So cool. She has her own thing going on, and Reina just flows with it. Clearly, they have an understanding that's been forged through being the two band geeks that show up early every morning, but it's also an understanding based on similarity in outlook. They prioritize their music to such a degree that's unusual compared to the rest of the band, and just naturally, socially, they're not as open or extroverted or easy to gel with other people as most other, members of the band. And then there was Kumiko. Oh man, Kumiko, who was like just super awkward and not used to this kind of intense, focused, ethereal vibe that Mizore has. So it was just fun watching Kumiko flounder and have no idea how to engage with Mizore. Mizore responding with, I don't know, to whether that she likes practicing was very relatable. Remember before when we were talking about what it means to live for your instrument and how there are times when even the most dedicated musicians will be like, I don't know why I keep doing this. And I really felt that from Mizore. You'd think that someone who shows up early every single morning to practice would really love what they do. And yet there could be any other number of reasons why they're showing up. It could be that they feel it's the only thing that they have going on in their life right now, which may or may not be healthy. It may be that they do love playing their instrument, but they're struggling through a mental block that's also making it the worst thing ever. A musician's relationship with their instrument can be complicated. It is not always sunshine and rainbows. And it really mirrors human relationships. The first few weeks, for example, of dating someone is exciting, it's fresh, it's new, you're really into it, and it feels very different compared to when you've been married for them to 40 years. You still love them, but there are always so many ups and downs, and at any given period of time, you can just feel like you're in the pits, even though you still love them. In a later scene with Yuuko also there, I loved how Mizore just threw a social etiquette bomb into their midst and caught Yuuko and Kumiko and Reina off guard too by asking whether Yuuko was close with them. And Kumiko's awkwardness is on brand every single time. She does that weird hand gesture every time that she's flustered and she can't deal with a situation or is about to spit some very unhelpful word from it. Yuuko and Reina, on the other hand, recovered so well. I was so proud of them. They didn't sidestep the issue or pretend not to hear, but they faced it head on with a bit of humor. And I was impressed that actually it was Reina who took the first step to jokingly ask, are we good? And then Yuuko being mature enough to recognize that it was Reina extending an olive branch and accepting it with grace, while also keeping it light so that it wasn't awkward central. And through this very short interaction, I really got the sense that Yuuko looks out for Mizore. Just the fact of Yuuko being close friends with Mizore was interesting. Yes, they knew each other from middle school, but first instinct was to kind of imagine how their personalities would clash. Like, how does it even work? Like, Yuuko is just so bubbly and out there and intense, and then Mizore is this kind of like block of ice at the back of a fridge or a freezer. And it's not that Mizore just tolerates Yuuko. There is a comfortableness there that reveals a solid friendship that's withstood a lot of drama and tests. Now, given Mizore's more passive nature, I think a lot of credit has to go to Yuuko for maintaining their friendship. I could imagine a possible reason for Mizore being totally unaware of band drama is because Yuuko keeps her out of it. She obviously didn't spill to Mizore, even though she probably could have when the whole Kaori versus Reina drama was happening. So it just seems like Yuuko lets Mizore be. So good on Yuuko for doing that. However, I too was confused for a second over why Mizore had asked Yuuko if she was close to the other two, because it was a question that showed total ignorance over what had gone down between Reina and Yuuko. Because wasn't Mizore around when all of that had happened? Or if for whatever reason she wasn't in the room when Yuuko had that outburst, that very public outburst, surely she would have heard about it from people gossiping about Taki's supposed favoritism, etc., etc. And if nothing else, she would have been there for the re-audition and saw the controversy around Reina getting the part over KyoAni. But it just seems like we have to accept she has this superpower that allows her to hyper-focus on her music and be trapped in her own world such that she has no idea how tense it had gotten between everyone. Or another possibility is that she is generally aware but is incredibly uninterested and was just like, so you guys good now? Okay, I'm just going to go back to my music. Like, I don't know. It was weird. But that's Mizore for you. I feel like she is going to be a character that represents anyone who is just so closed in and so into her own feelings that a lot of things that are happening around her escape her attention. Whatever the reason for Mizore not knowing what had happened between Yuuko and Reina, she is incredibly detached from what is happening with people in the band in a way that is slightly worrying. We know that her detachment is not because she is naturally someone who doesn't give a shit about anything. Clearly, she was very hurt over what went down last year and feels betrayed almost by Nozomi. So I wonder whether this extreme detachment is an ingrained defense mechanism that she projects indifference to band drama because of how deeply hurt she was last year when she allowed herself to become invested. And because she hasn't properly dealt with the trauma of last year's split, she is maybe dissociating to manage her pain. Maybe she's just maxed out her capacity for band drama. And because there's all of this pent-up anger from not knowing who to blame, she's kind of just locked up, like a stone. She also seems like the kind of person who would never talk about or express her feelings to anyone, which makes it even worse. The only times that Mizore had any visible emotional reaction was when Nozomi was either mentioned or just floated into her mental vicinity. Like, just the thought of Nozomi returning triggered fear in Mizore, and like the debilitating kind too, to the point where Mizore felt sick, physically sick from just hearing Nozomi play her flute. Also, later at band camp, when Mizore was outside playing rhythm games, she couldn't even stand to hear the piece that she'd played with Nozomi through Kumiko's earphones. Now, that all points to some extreme anxiety, definite dissociative symptoms, and like the persistence of some really unhealthy, unresolved internal issues. But also, it's understandable. I know that, especially in relation to not being able to stand listening to a certain piece of music, I know that for some people, and myself included at one point, it's possible to associate a piece of music with a past horrible experience or a painful experience, and that hearing it again can trigger memories that you'd rather not have. And we know that from the flashbacks that Mizore's unresolved issues extend way back to when both she and Nozomi were very close bandmates at Minami Middle School. And that theme that they played on the bus as they came home from the competition where they placed a very disappointing second place is actually a very famous theme from Alexander Borodin's 1890 opera Prince Igor, and specifically it's a theme from the Polovtsian dances called the Gliding Dance of the Maidens, which was originally scored with a very prominent flute and oboe parts, obviously because this is Mizore and Nozomi's theme. Now, what made the theme so famous later on, and I found this fascinating, was its adaptation into a song for a Broadway musical called Stranger in Paradise, which was performed by many different artists, including the one and only Tony Bennett. And I feel like that adaptation is like the perfect soundtrack to the memories and the kind of relationship that Nozomi and Mizore have with each other. Okay, I'm just going to pull up Tony Bennett's rendition of Stranger in Paradise, and I've already got the lyrics up there. Yeah, so this was the same theme that played in this flashback scene of them on the bus after having placed a disappointing second. And I also believe, I'm not 100% sure, but it was also the track that was blasting out of Kumiko's earphones at the end of episode 2, and Mizore was like, ugh, please stop playing that track. So, Stranger in Paradise turned the classical theme from Borodin's opera into a lover's duet, and the lyrics describe a plea from one person to another to not leave them behind, to accept and to love them so that they feel like they belong somewhere. And there's also a sense that the person singing these lyrics feels somewhat inadequate and self-conscious about not being good enough for the other person, who they refer to as an angel, so someone elevated above them, even while really needing that person. And I was like, what? That describes Mizore and Nozomi's relationship perfectly, in my mind. So there was a promise made between the two that they would go back together and win first place in high school. Because losing the Kyoso competition, the easier one, had been a huge blow to them, especially when they'd won the Kansai competition in the previous year. So it was like this really embarrassing fall from grace. So when Nozomi quit, it would have, understandably, to Mizore, felt like she was being left behind. Like, what about the promise that they'd made to each other? And it seems like there was an immediate breakdown in their relationship right afterwards, because it doesn't seem like they talked to each other since then. Now, here was the part where I was like, this fits so perfectly, is that memory that Mizore had of Nozomi taking her by the hand to lead her somewhere. We've seen that before. It's kind of similar to the way that Reina grabs Kumiko by the hand, not just physically, but also in terms of grabbing her to drag her out of her passiveness. And if Nozomi and Mizore's relationship mirrored Kumirei in some way, then it is understandable why their breakup would have been so devastating. So I love that we got these memories of the same moment from both Mizore and Nozomi's perspectives. What else did I find fascinating? Yes, so why did I find the lyrics of this song or this adaptation so relevant is that there is a sense I get that Mizore looked up to Nozomi and viewed her as this shining example of someone to emulate. Someone who loved music just as much as she did, but also was a close friend who she could rely on to journey with her on this quest to become better musicians. And so her expectations of Nozomi were like sky high. But that only meant that when Nozomi deviated from those expectations, Mizore broke. So even though Nozomi and the others had very valid reasons for quitting, Mizore didn't or couldn't see that. All she saw was Nozomi leaving her and breaking her promise. So going back to the lyrics of Stranger in Paradise, why does it fit these two so well? Mizore is the one who saw Nozomi as that perfect angel who could take her places and be that comforting presence to reassure her that she is good enough, that they are in this together. And I mean, the very first line of the song says, "Take my hand, I'm a stranger in paradise." And from Nozomi's point of view, like, I'm pretty sure that she still feels guilty for abandoning Mizore, even though I don't think she did anything wrong. And maybe that's why she never talked to Mizore afterwards. She felt so bad that she doesn't even think she deserves to keep that friendship. I feel there's an important lesson there. It's not wrong to respect and love your friends and have expectations of them, but when those expectations become wholly unrealistic to the point where you become blind to their weaknesses or to their own needs, and you only focus on what they mean to you and what they've promised you or what you expect of them, that's when a relationship can turn from a healthy one, a healthy, productive, mutually reinforcing one, into an unhealthy, destructive, just totally unrealistic, one-sided relationship. And it seems like Mizore was over-reliant maybe on Nozomi and didn't understand that Nozomi had a lot of other things to consider before deciding to quit. Conversely, maybe Nozomi didn't reach out to communicate what she was thinking either. Who knows? Like me, I just hope that they can work things out before the end of the season. Before I move on, I just found this comment from Syrup, which said, Mizore and Nozomi's relationship seems like a fold to Kumiko and Reina's. Mizore reminds me of Kumiko at the start of season 1, where she was directionless and was pulled along by someone else who had greater passion. Except instead of developing her own passion, Mizore still seems to be dependent on Nozomi to give her a purpose, which is why she sounds so lost right now. Like you said, it's so interesting how different people react to the same type of situation. That is exactly what I was thinking, and I'm so glad I found this comment, because great minds think alike. It is interesting that Kumirei, that relationship is almost like what it could have been if Mizore had developed a more healthy relationship with Nozomi in terms of separating out her own passion and Nozomi's passion, and not tying her own passion to someone else's journey. Because like in any relationship, it's not necessarily just musicians who have this intense desire for pursuing music, and it just becomes all very explosive emotionally when things go wrong. You need to know yourself, and you need to know your own passion and have your own interests and desires that are independent from anyone else, no matter how close they are. So yes, thank you for that. I think that's exactly what I meant when I rambled for like the last 10 minutes or so. I'm glad that Kumiko asked why Yuuko and Mizore stayed, and according to Nozomi, Mizore stayed because she was the only oboe. So part of it might have been obligation, otherwise the band would have been without an oboe. But also, as the only oboe, she didn't have to give up her competition spot to a senpai, which meant she didn't have to fight for it like Nozomi and the others did and be given shit for doing so. However, from Mizore's perspective, I think it goes deeper than that. When Kumiko asked a similar question to Mizore, if you're still hurting from your past experience with the band, why are you still in it? Mizore gave a very similar answer to when she was asked if she really likes practicing the oboe, and her answer was, I don't really know anymore. So from that, I took that part of her is still clinging on to the unfulfilled promise that Nozomi made with her about winning nationals. So even though Nozomi is not here anymore and Mizore apparently hates competitions, which we'll talk about in a bit, how do you let go of something that you once put all of your hope in? And now with the band the way that it is, maybe this is the year that they'll actually be able to do it. That chance would be really hard to let go of, despite Mizore still carrying some very heavy emotional baggage. There's one last thing to discuss in that scene with Mizore and Kumiko at band camp. Well, actually, first I was surprised that Mizore even invited Kumiko to come sit next to her. Maybe it was like getting really late and she was really tired and couldn't sleep, and so her social filter is off, or maybe she just really needed someone to sit there with her so that she wouldn't be completely alone with her thoughts. And one of those thoughts being that she hates competitions. Not a strange thing to say, even though she's been competing for several years at this point. Often it's one of those love-hate relationships where you love playing and you want to do well, and one of the best ways to keep progressing is to participate in competitions, but also hating the pressure and the expectations that come with participating in them. So I relate to Mizore in the sense that competitions aren't the nicest thing you can do. I'd just much rather be in my own room playing happily on my piano or my violin, but what are you going to do? With Mizore though, I found it interesting that she specifically hates competitions because she thinks that the results depend on the subjective opinions of a few judges. Now, as someone who learnt music for years and then taught music and has been in competitions, did I agree with her? And that was a surprisingly difficult question to answer. There is no doubt that the judgment of music is unavoidably subjective to a degree. Even with just a narrow focus on classical music, two people can prefer different interpretations of the same 200-year-old piece. A piece can be played more rigidly, or it can really push the boundaries a bit more and be more free-flowing. So it does come down to a matter of taste and preference for different styles in some cases. However, it is also true that music and the performance of music can be judged objectively according to dozens of different parameters that form the core structure of any piece of music. For example, like how well does it respect the meter and the rhythms? Are the notes played correctly? Is it phrased properly and pleasantly? What is the quality and the tone of the performance? And if you're judging a composition, like how complex is the piece, and does the complexity add depth to it, or is it just superfluous? I found that in competitions where orchestras or a band is playing the same set piece, and often they will, out of a repertoire of 3 to 4 songs, have one piece that every single orchestra or band has to play. And they do that because it's an easier point of comparison. And often with these types of set pieces, the difference between first and second place rests on judgments around these sorts of objective parameters that I just mentioned. Not so much on whether a judge prefers the stylistic choices of one orchestra over another. Now, I'm not ruling out that that's a possibility, but in my personal experience, you can often hear for yourself why a particular orchestra played the piece better and won. So I don't agree with Mizore that judging music is always 100% subjective opinion. And I've had this conversation so many times over the years. I think people who have that extreme view also have a misconception that acknowledging that everyone has different musical tastes is equivalent to saying that any piece of music is as good as every other piece of music, or that every performance is just as good as any other performance, because that's not true at all. And the easiest test for that is, imagine that I gave an opinion that one of my beginner violin students could play Vivaldi's Four Seasons just as well as Paganini did. Now, I personally may prefer the sound of chicken scratch violin to the playing of the world's best maestro because I'm nuts. But no one could say that it's wrong of me to enjoy chicken scratch violin more. However, people who really know their music could give a million reasons for why Paganini's rendition is superior based on like note accuracy, rhythmic interpretation, phrasing, tonal variation, the ability to convey the expressions in the piece properly and fully. So we can come to the conclusion that one can subjectively like objectively bad music or music performances, and that's totally fine. You just can't say, oh, everything is subjective and therefore all music is the same as every other piece of music. I think like in any other creative field where judgments are made all the time, like in art or in writing, it's obvious when something's bad, but there's also plenty of room for fruitful discussions when personal taste does come in. And there are definitely areas where it's less black and white as to whether one piece is better than the other. There's still more to go on these 2 episodes, but not much more, I think. So it is curious how deeply invested Kumiko is in drama that involves other people. And we mentioned this in season 1, but it became far more obvious in these opening episodes of season 2. Now, I guess it's not curious at all because Kumiko just loves getting all up in that drama. She just can't take her mind off an issue that mostly concerns third years and second years, and a lot of them she doesn't even know that well, like Mizore and NOZOMI. Even when she had people like Natsuki and Haruka tell her to just focus on the competition, Kumiko can't help but worry about it and think of ways to help solve the problem, even though at this stage it is way beyond her scope, given how complicated these relationships are and all the history that's behind them that she isn't even aware of. The moment that Kumiko promised to help convince Asuka to let Nozomi rejoin the band, a tiny part of me was like, yes. But then the much larger, more sensible part of me was like, oh no, because it just feels like she's sticking her foot into a bear trap. She doesn't have a deep understanding of the context of what happened last year, including how people's feelings were hurt and how people still feel about it in the band. All of the conversations that Asuka must have already had with Nozomi, the depth of the relationship between Nozomi and Mizore, and just all of the tension that's still there. As I said before, Asuka has like a general's view of the overall battlefield. She knows what's good for the band as a whole, and she also knows intimately the individuals that are part of that band. Kumiko has none of that intelligence, and I mean intelligence, not smart, dumb intelligence, but information. She wasn't there last year, so she doesn't know anything. Everything she knows is like secondhand. Equally as important, do we really want the commander of Awkward Central taking on this mediator role? And I think even Nozomi knew that it wasn't going to be a good idea, even if she did appreciate the gesture. Taki-sensei, we confirmed that Taki doesn't really have much of a life outside of his work. He finds his work rewarding, but there was also a sense that he throws himself into it due to unfortunate circumstances related to his lack of a family. And the sad kind of way that he specifically mentioned having no wife and no kids, and the fact that they have showed him now several times looking like wistfully at a female in the photo that he keeps in his music folder and whom he thanked after winning the Kyoto competition. You put all that together and it makes you feel as though he did have a wife or a partner at one point, and now he no longer does. So I'm curious to find out more about that, because if Taki did suffer a great personal loss, it would raise some interesting questions about the timing of his arrival at Kataoji and his motivations for taking over the band, especially if his partner or former partner played a huge role in motivating him to pursue a career in music. And maybe that he's doing all of this, taking an underdog band and transforming them into a band that's living out its full potential. Maybe he's doing that as a tribute to or in memory of someone that was hugely important to his own journey of discovering his potential and his passion for music. There were some other interesting moments in these two episodes. We met the guest instructor Hashimoto, who is a percussionist expert. And here I'm going to pull up Sunday Trousers' comment, which had some interesting insight to say about sort of why Taki was pulling in these guest instructors from outside. So when I was in high school, our band director was a percussionist. He was proficient in most instruments, but when you're dealing with high school seniors, some of which have been taking lessons since they were kids, that proficiency probably isn't enough for actual teaching. Very true. So I remember us constantly having 2 or 3 extra adults around that he had brought in to cover his weak areas. Taki bringing in friends from college who are professionals in the industry tracks 100%, whether they're getting paid or not. As for Reina's obsession with Taki, I'm not sure I even consider it an anime trope. Yes, this is about Reina having a massive crush on Taki, which I actually also agree with. I think totally normal for kids to have crushes on their teachers. Slightly less normal, and I would say kind of more unusual for a kid to imagine an actual future with a teacher and just be so engrossed in playing out that fantasy in their head on a daily basis. I think that is slightly more unusual with Reina, but it's Reina. She's always going to be unusual. Also, your disdain for any male character that isn't Goto is strong. I can't argue there. Okay, with Shuuichi, I mean, we already talked about Shuuichi, so hopefully you guys understand a bit better why I react that way to that character, even though I still ultimately think that Shuuichi is a good kid. Hashimoto, I mean, look, we don't have too much to go on to comment in any real depth about his character, only to say that if he was a real life visiting conductor, some of his behaviors would be legit questionable and like, ugh, especially the joking about Taki being popular with the girls and him saying like, oh, you underage girls must be all over him out loud. That was unbelievable. But it's anime, and I get that it's anime, and I get that he's not a serious character. But instinctively, I will, a lot of times, especially when watching an anime like Hibike, because it matches so closely with real life experiences of being in a school band most every other time, I will imagine what it'd be like if things that are happening in the anime happened in real life. And Hashimoto in real life would just be kind of a creep. So look, guys, I'm waiting for the day where I've watched enough anime that I am totally desensitized to stuff like that. And I won't have an instinctive like yuck reaction, but I'm not sure if that day will ever come, so you guys are just gonna have to deal with me. Although I have to say, Hashimoto did make some very valid music teaching points, and I think he was actually great as a music instructor. His comment about their personalities coming across as reserved and quiet and encouraging them to be like bolder in their playing was really useful. Although I found it odd that the entire band is mostly reserved, because usually there is like a huge mix of personalities, and some people who are really reserved or introverted are like beasts on their instruments. But anyway, that was an interesting observation that Hashimoto made. Also, in terms of musical expression, there are moments in a piece, especially the fortissimo sections, which means very loud, where you do have to dig deep into your feelings to find the aggression that is fitting for that part. And it's very therapeutic. Like, I have told students who held back too much to think about something that makes them really angry or really excited, and then to express that through the music and to be able to, I guess, portray that kind of emotion unreservedly through an instrument feels really good. So I appreciated that little note from Hashimoto. I thought the introduction of Niiyama sensei during the 3-day band camp was hilarious because they did the mysterious, glamorous entrance with the hidden face and the flowing hair and a very captivating, like, sexy walk up towards the front, clearly playing up her femininity and charisma as a woodwind instructor. And the students, of course, all fell in love with her, but far more importantly, she has credibility as an amazing music instructor. Because if Midori, the genius student, says she's legit, then she is legit. I didn't really know what to make of the very lighthearted, explicitly flirtatious exchange that Taki had with Niiyama sensei in front of all the students. But we knew where it was going, right? Reina being butthurt about the whole situation. Do we feel bad for Reina? Yes, of course we do. It's just such a hopeless situation that even Kumiko, who normally sticks her foot into her mouth to try and help, recognized that doing so would probably make things worse in this particular case. But credit where credit is due. When Reina was still plagued with the worry that the love of her life might already be taken, Kumiko did a surprisingly decent job reassuring her, albeit giving her kind of also, again, questionable advice about asking Taki directly and just casually suggesting that Reina is probably his type because she's more mature than other kids her own age. A more reasonable person, and probably not a high schooler, would have been like, girl, he is too old for you and you've got a good thing going on with your current girlfriend. Anyway, whatever happens, I still love the Kumirei friendship and the fact that they support each other in everything, including in this thing. Finally, there was that trip to the pool and like the obligatory boob talk, and I cannot believe that Kumiko didn't recognize Asuka without her glasses. It was kind of just nice seeing them interact in a setting that is not band practice or intense competition. There was like Yuuko drooling over Kaori, Oh, interestingly, I just noticed she refers to KyoAni as an angel from the heavens, just like in the lyrics of Stranger in Paradise. So maybe there's that, hopefully not as unhealthy a connection that Mizore had to Nozomi, but there's definitely an element of that there. I feel like KyoAni would have been drooling over Asuka. Not externally, because she's too classy for that, internally only. And then Natsuki once again cementing her status as the coolest grunge girl ever. So that is the end of this recap. Oh my god. My rants have become wildly uncontrollable and unruly, but there's just so much going on and such deep emotional wells to draw insights from. Now, my biggest concern going into episode 3 is whether Kumiko manages to pull off a miracle and fix everyone's problems, or more likely messes everything up horribly when speaking to Asuka. So, let's watch. Okay guys, Hibike episode 3 after a million years. Let's just jump right into it. Let's sync this in 3, 2, 1, go. I know. Kumiko's gonna get eaten alive by Asuka. I mean, although Asuka does have a soft spot for Kumiko, so maybe there's a 50-50 chance that she won't end up Asuka food. It has been so long hearing this OP. I think I am undecided as to whether I prefer the first season's OP or this one. I'll have to listen to them side by side properly. I mean, what there is no question about, though, is who the best girl is for me. I mean, I don't want to start any best girl wars, but Natsuki, I feel like is winning in the competition quite, hands down. I also think it's cute that they showed Shuuichi with Kumiko, like baby Shuuichi and baby Kumiko learning from Mamiko. I would love to know more about that history of their friendship. That was Taki and I guess his partner, girlfriend, wife. Yeah, that was definitely the woman in that photo. Ugh, yuck, cicada. Sorry. Beaver. Oh, oh no. I know this, and you can't make any mistakes. It's a marathon. It really is a marathon. Only 20-minute break. Yeah, that sounds about right too. Asuka, the only non-human in this band. Maybe Mizore too. Ugh, she chickened out. I don't know. Do you want to just make sure that you have 20 minutes to talk about this very complicated issue? Simple B flat measures. He is good. He's a good instructor. Hmm. God, they're really whipping them into shape. Da 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 da. Oh man, that articulation is very difficult. It's actually amazing that they were able to record that articulation as not being perfect. Ah, they were smiling. The other base parents. Reina. Uh, you know what? It sounds harsh, but I have to admit that I have said that about some students. In encouragement, you know. Hmm. Oh man, I feel like this is just hitting all of her pain points. Oh god, I don't know if I would have done that. Like, compare it directly to someone else who's much better. Yeah, music with feeling is much harder to squeeze out than music that's perfectly technical or technically perfect. But going back to what I was saying quickly about Mizore's pain points, one, she's so locked up in her trauma that she can't let herself feel anything because otherwise she'll think back to all the bad things that's happened. And so she kind of just has frozen all of her emotions, is what I'm guessing is happening. But it's impacting her way of playing too because you can't have frozen emotions. You need to let them out through your music. Poor Mizore. Oh. Oh no. Kumiko, say no. No. Now is not the time to be passive, Kumiko. We will go back to Hashimoto's speech because it was actually very on point. Covers one of the most difficult things that students struggle with when they hit a certain standard, how to put feeling into your music and not just play what's on the page. Just waiting for Asuka to flip the switch becomes super scary. Here we go. Come on, Kumiko, use your brain. Ever the mystery. It was Mizore. It was Mizore. Ugh. Okay, I don't know why Nozomi wouldn't be aware of this though. If she is totally unaware, then she also is a little bit emotionally stunted too. That makes sense. Okay, but Asuka, you could also help Mizore and Nozomi repair the relationship, maybe. Be a little bit more proactive. Maybe it's more complicated than that. Oh god, and now that she's told Kumiko this, Kumiko is gonna go ahead and try and fix Nozomi and Mizore. Oh. I feel like we're watching a train wreck happening in slow motion. There's a lot of sad Kumiko this episode. Lightened by Kumirei. uh, not emotionally prepared. Hey, it's the face squeeze that Reina did to her last season. Ugh, where did he even come from? No, no, this is definitely crossing a line. Technically. Oh, is this gonna ruin Reina? Maybe Reina won't be able to play the trumpet. Oh my god, this guy just spilling his friend's secrets to his student. Hmm. Okay, that was pretty good. uh, that is sweet. Okay, so just confirmed. Incredibly tragic story. Closure. Yes, Kumiko, because that's none of your business. Oh my god. It's okay, she's a high schooler. She'll learn. They have next to them. Everyone's out there protecting Mizore. I mean, these two, if anyone was going to have a shot at repairing this relationship, these two would help, right? Can't we just talk it out? Communicate. This is, oh my god, Kumiko just gives me brain pain. I don't even know what's going through her mind. Okay, but Yuko's got this. Yuko's like taken pity on Kumiko. Well. Oh man. It's like the billionth time that Yuko has called Cody an angel. I do love that they didn't wrap this problem up in a neat bow. Like they still hold their opinions, but they've kind of made peace with each other. They just put aside their personal feelings for the good of the group. Okay, so I feel like Asuka deducted by herself that Mizore would have a total breakdown if Nozomi came back in. And for some reason, the other people don't know about Mizore. The only person who does is Yuuko. Hmm. Hmm. So competition cuts both ways. I mean, uh, okay, I don't know. Maybe Japanese judges are particularly harsh. I don't know any judge who would write that on an evaluation sheet. Damn. There you go. That's why Yuko was able to put aside her personal feelings. Yeah. She's like, if I insist on Cowdy, then I'm no better than the 30ers who got their competition spots through no merit of their own. At least she has that degree of self awareness and didn't want to be a hypocrite. It's like the least of Kumiko's worries now. She's like asking everyone, so she's trying to figure out her own opinions. Ooh, there we go with the tough ass take. The thing is, Reina is speaking from a position of privilege because she is incredibly talented. Asuka. Ah, oh, so pretty. Is this a nocturne? She sounds so good. That vibrato. See, I feel like this is where we're getting the real Asuka. Unfiltered Asuka, deep down Asuka. It's through her music. You're not gonna get it through her words or in her conversation with other people. Wait, did we? Okay, I don't remember this from last time. It's been too long. Oh, I can already see that we're gonna have a ton of stuff to discuss, and a lot of it relating to what it feels like to play music and to play an instrument to a level, to a higher level, really. Like there was all of that discussion about competitions, Kumiko asking different people their opinions about competitions because of the way that Mizore had said how much she hated them. And you got a whole spectrum of opinions, right? And any one of which I couldn't say was wrong. Reina isn't wrong in terms of look, at the end of the day, you have to make a judgment call on who's a better player or who's the better band, and there are ways to do that. That's not totally subjective. But then, there's Yuuko who's sort of in the middle ground where it's like, you know what? Sometimes it's unfair or not unfair. It's harsh to judge music and assign like gold, silver, or bronze status to it. But that's just part of the whole rigmarole of competitions. And it can cut either way. So if you're assigned a bronze, it feels really shit because it's like all of this effort that you put into it and you're still inferior to someone else. And that will always be the case. There will always be someone else who is better than you. On on the other hand, if you do well in competitions, it feels really good. It feels good to know that you were validated by an objective measure to say that, yes, you, compared to other people, have exceeded a level that is worth recognizing. And then, of course, you have Mizore, who is on the other extreme to Reina. He's like, no, all competition is bad. I hate competitions. It causes me depression. And all three of those positions is entirely understandable. I feel like there's also some interesting questions, which we will go back to at the end very quickly. The conversation that Kumiko had with Asuka about Mizore. So it turned out, I mean, a lot of things turned out the way that we predicted them, right? That Asuka isn't just being an a-hole on purpose. She is very concerned about Mizore and the fact that, yes, she is still the only obo that is in band, and so they have to preserve her at the expense of Nozomi. There was a comment in the last video that mentioned how some people see the drama of season 2 in Hibike as overdone or just over dramatic. And I kind of get where that view would come from, because I also am already starting to experience a little bit of like, why don't they just all sit down and talk it out? Why can't Yuuko and Natsuki get together, talk to Nozomi, just break it to her gently that Mizore has an issue with her, understandably, and then try and bring the two of them, Nozomi and Mizore, together to the table and just kind of all talk it out until all the feelings and the anger and the hurt and the betrayal gets all talked out and they reach some kind of accord, if possible, instead of kind of just keeping everything status quo and just being like, oh, we have to separate Nozomi and Mizore, otherwise Mizore will have a total meltdown and you know, her brain will break and everything will go to shit. Like, I don't really know what's holding them back from taking that step. I guess it wouldn't make for as interesting a story as it is. But other than that, yeah, I'm curious, well, very interested to see how all of this drama will unfold. All right, moving straight on to episode 4 in 3, 2, 1, go. Ah, yes, Taki and his wife. And Kumiko? I don't know why Kumiko was even thinking that whether or not she should tell Reina about Taki-sensei's past wife. I'm like, man, sometimes you just have to know when it is your place to spill someone else's business, I guess. Yeah, I'm sure that's a lesson that Kumiko will learn as she grows up. Oh, yes. Also, the other thing that I will definitely get into, and I'd be curious to see what you guys think, is Hashimoto's speech about Mizore and her oboe solo and how it's brilliant technically, but boring. And it's just one of those things that as a music teacher, there's only so much you can do to help a student discover how to release emotion into their music and into their performance. It really is something that just comes with maturity. And honestly, I think it's just something, not to say that younger students don't get it as much, but I find more mature students, either mentally or age-wise, find it easier to do, to inject personal feelings and emotion into the performance. But yeah, we'll talk about that later. Holy crap, that is a lot of bands. Taki's all over it. Oh, that was the band on TV. Hey. Midori is excited. Mm-hmm. I like Hashimoto. I just minus the creepy parts. That's a huge vote of confidence from Taki. Just keep doing what you're doing. Man, this whole season is it just gonna be Kumiko being like, should I tell this other person what another person told me about them? The answer is usually no. Ooh. I mean, it's big of her to apologize for that. It's kind of, I guess it's easier to just dismiss it and be like, oh, because it's the high schooler, instead of try to explain that she can do better. Okay, the head bashing. This is not encouraging. Man, I feel like Kumiko really. I hope she doesn't suffer because of all this drama. Okay, that's like a usual occurrence. Mamiko just storming out the house. Do you know what would be a really harsh way to do it? Just put Nozomi in front of Mizore and be like, here, play with your feelings now. Okay, it's good to see that Kumiko is still focusing on practice, but it seems like she is hugely distracted and her playing might suffer. Oh no. Articulation sounds pretty good though. Don't know why characters in Hippocrates just have this tendency to pop up out of nowhere and surprise people. Hmm. Ooh, this is like pre-split or pre-Nozomi leaving. Oh no. Ugh. Okay, I feel like Nozomi should try and talk to Mizore. Hmm. I don't know what was going through Nozomi's mind when she kind of just paused. It seemed like she was a bit scared for a second of Haruka and Cody. The incident. Okay. Alright, so Kumiko didn't cause anything. Man, Mizore. I think Mizore needs like professional help. I don't know. That's really a response that's just so big and traumatized. Also, was Yuko saying she was mad because Nozomi didn't reach out to Mizore to fix things? She kind of just assumed everything was okay. This is very dramatic. It's odd that Kumiko is actually in a position of trust with Mizore. Just because of that one night that they had a conversation at band camp. It's really sad. Um, I was so wrong. Oh no. Mm. That's exactly what I was thinking. Nor would I have imagined that. Come on, Mizore, you still have Yuuko. You gotta tell her. Why do I feel like this is such a horribly complicated, weird love triangle? Oh. It's the face squish again. Kumiko's like, please get a room. Okay, here's like the positive stuff. Reminding her that she has her own accomplishments, achievements. She enjoyed her instrument outside of the time that it got her with Nozomi. Oh god. She's like carrying the burden of guilt for everyone who quit last year. Like she shouldn't enjoy their success because they all quit and couldn't enjoy it. Oh god, she's probably feeling something, allowing herself to feel an emotion for the first time since last year. Oh. Oh. Thank you. Thank you, Yuuko, the voice of reason. I mean, after whatever all that was, the climbing on top of Mizore. Asuka. Oh god. Asuka's just like, fix it, or I'm having your head. Wait, but that's not what she asked though. She asked, why didn't you tell me that you were gonna quit? Mm. Haruka. Ugh, the smile. Whoa, what just happened? Oh my god. Oh, Yuuko. It's always being like third wheeled. First it was Cloudy. Oh my god. Then it's Nozomi. You know what? Yuuko will always have Natsuki. No. It's like a Uno reverse cut. Asuka. Hmm. That is too much expectation to put on someone. Yuuko-chan was insurance. Oh my god. Yeah, I don't know, Oscar. I don't know. Oh, I thought she was going to say something threatening. This is not a front. You can tell. Like Asuka has always cared about getting to nationals. Yeah, scary is the correct word to use when talking about Asuka. Just processing the events of the day with Reina. That is the healthiest answer, and that smile on Kumiko's face. Because she's like, oh, thank God, Reina is still Reina. That was a wild episode. I got teary towards the end when all of the emotions came bubbling out of Mizore, and then Nozomi was there to be like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you think that you didn't matter to me. Whoa. Just need a moment to calm down. Okay, so I was very wrong about Mizore's reason for being so upset with Nozomi. It did not occur to me, like Kumiko said, that it was because she felt that she didn't matter in the grand scheme of things to Nozomi, because Nozomi, you know, she was popular, she had other friends, she was one who dragged Mizore out, you know, took her around, got her to join the band in the first place. But she was just Mizore was just one of Nozomi's many friends, whereas for Mizore, Nozomi became her world. She played oboe. I mean, I'm assuming she would have played oboe before meeting Nozomi. I guess it was just more of an individual enterprise as opposed to a group one. So wait, let me just pause this for a sec. So the fact that Nozomi was the one who dragged Mizore to band, and Mizore, it just became a whole thing for Mizore. Like, she idolized Nozomi to the point where the entire reason for her continuing to play oboe, whatever reason it was before, became playing for Nozomi. Playing the oboe to please Nozomi, to make it to nationals together so that she could be with Nozomi in that moment of success. It's bizarre to me. I mean, it's not entirely impossible, but it is very bizarre to me that someone could pick up an instrument and keep playing that instrument and stay in band for one person and one person only. I can't imagine putting in that much practice and that much effort and literal blood for someone. It was interesting though. So obviously Mizore kept playing oboe even after Nozomi had quit the band. And it was amazing the way that Yuuko made her realize that she had reasons for continuing to play the oboe other than Nozomi. All the work and the effort that she put in to become better with the band, the oboe solo that she got, that she did really well in at the Kyoto competition, the fact that she had fun with everyone else, even though Nozomi wasn't there, proved that she had her own passion for the oboe going that wasn't dependent on Nozomi being there and hearing her play. Ugh. I just don't know why Yuuko had to climb on top of Mizore to tell her all of that, but I guess it just added to the drama. Oh man, guys, I don't know. I am looking forward so much to the comments that you guys are gonna throw at this video, because I'm seriously, my mind is still spinning so fast from all of the conversations that we had in quick succession, and just trying to wrap my head around. Okay, Mizore we talked about, but on Nozomi's end, Nozomi just being completely unaware that her departure and her not telling Mizore that she was going to quit the band had such a huge impact on Mizore. It's been a while since her quitting, and I would have thought that they would have come across each other at school. Nozomi certainly has been showing up at band practice quite a bit. Like, how is this the first time that Nozomi has discovered or found out that Mizore thought about her in this way, and that even just the sight of her made her physically sick? I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board and sort of sit down and rewatch to see how Nozomi could have missed all those signs. It's probably going to come down to she had a lot of friends and she just, you know, Mizore didn't zoom into her focus that much. There was also the funny thing she said about like when they were actually talking face to face with each other and getting all of their emotions out, and Mizore asked Nozomi, why didn't you tell me that you were going to quit? And then Nozomi answered, well, because I wasn't planning on asking you to quit with me, or, you know, you were practicing so well on your own and I couldn't do that to you. And that didn't quite compute with me. It didn't quite answer the question of, well, Mizore thought her only friend in the entire world was Nozomi, and yet Nozomi didn't reciprocate that, which led to this whole misunderstanding. and all the hurt that Mizore went through, while Nozomi remained oblivious and thought they were still really good friends. I just felt like I'm glad that they sorted things out and that they reconciled, but I'm not sure if that problem of having a very unequal relationship was really solved. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to think about it. Yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna actually just end it there. I feel like I have already spewed out all of my initial thoughts about these 2 episodes. I will go back and rewatch, and we are gonna have a bloody talk fest next time, because there's so many people to cover, so many conflicts and emotions and misunderstandings to try and pass, that yeah, it's going to be a big one next time. So anyway, thank you guys for waiting so long to begin with for this next installment. I promise, and I can actually promise this because I know schedule wise that it's a bit easier for me now to put out a bit more content. But yes, please look forward to the next reaction video, so episodes 5 and 6 of HBK. In the meantime, let me know what you think. Wall texts, very welcome. And yeah, we'll have a chat next time. Take care, guys, and I'll see you then.